To explain more about that legacy, we're joined by KHOU 11 political analyst Brandon Rottinghaus. Good morning, Brandon.
Morning, Mia and Len. How are you?
Good morning.
Well, lovely to have you with us. You know, we have former presidents in attendance today. The president here earlier this week. I think this just really speaks to how influential the late Congresswoman was, Brandon.
I think that's exactly right. She was known in Washington and here in Texas as a fighter and a servant. And if you look at the list of legislative accomplishments and the things that she fought for, women's rights, equality for all, LGBTQ rights, these are really the cornerstone of the things that people care about in her district and all across the world. And she was really able to deliver.
And so I'm not surprised that we have so many people here, but I think people perhaps are not aware. We were so used to seeing Congresswoman Lee in the 18th district doing so many things, you know, passing out water, handing out backpacks for schools, so local, and yet she was on caucuses, traveling internationally. She went to Michael Jackson's funeral. I mean, she seemed to be everywhere, and every presidential address to the nation, you always saw her very close to the
just
front.
over the president's shoulder, really.
Either over the shoulder or the first in line to get a shake. So speak to her her presence as a politician.
Yeah, it's a great point. Honestly, this is the kind of thing that we look at as being a real positive for members. They want to be visible. They want to be seen as fighters. And she definitely was that. She was a force for Houston and a force for good. There was a method to her madness. Being involved like that meant she was visible. And that meant that she could get that last plug in for, extra infrastructure funds for Houston or extra COVID relief sites. So there's a lot that she could do by being such a visible person. And what we saw was just the tip of the iceberg. She was on so many important committees, Homeland Security and the budget, that she really had influence that was both in front of the cameras, but also much behind the cameras.
And let's talk about behind the camera and the work that she did. She was able to achieve so much during her political career, but what is the legacy she leaves behind? What legislation will she be remembered for, Brandon?
I think some of the biggest pieces of legislation that she would be known for include a sentencing reform, which was much needed when it came about. There's also legislation on hate crimes, which she took a real interest in and spearheaded. She was part of a coalition of supporters to revise the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy to allow for LGBTQ soldiers to serve openly. The Violence Against Women Act, we could go on, but you're getting, I think, the common theme there, which is that she was a real fighter for the people who she cared about, and her district definitely rewarded her for it.
I know even just recently, I believe it was this spring, she reintroduced the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Explain to us what happened there, because that had been presented before, and here she was reintroducing it.
It had been, and these are obviously tough circumstances to get past anything in Congress these days. The goal, of course, was to get some real criminal justice reform that was going to make a difference in terms of how police did their jobs. It was a real passion of hers the last few years, and obviously something that was really important to Houston and to her district. So it's the kind of thing that I think is a perfect testament to her life and her political time, which is that she continued to fight for these things. There were uphill battles in a lot of cases, but she definitely never stopped pushing.
And she definitely had some major successes, some victories. I think a large part of her legacy that Lynn and I have covered in detail will be about Juneteenth and making Juneteenth a federal holiday after nearly 40 years since our last federal holiday, Brandon.
Impressive. And the fact that this was a bipartisan effort meant that it was clearly something that she had really worked hard for. The kind of relationships that she had that you really have to have in Washington were really on display in making that law.
Brandon Rottinghaus, thank you. Don't go anywhere. We'll have more to talk about just a little bit later as we get closer to 11 o'clock in the beginning of this celebration of life today.
Fantastic insight. Thank you.